my name is Sunny, and welcome to my video. I'm making this video because someone on Tumblr asked me, how do you feel about exploitation within the sex worker industry? And I recently gave a talk about violence within the porn industry and exploitation within the porn industry, and that's sort of the facet of the sex work industry that I am most informed about, and so that's the only one that I really feel like I can speak to. And instead of writing a novel to answer this question, I decided I would record a video since I've already given a talk pretty similar to this. Violence within the porn industry. So I think it's really important to point out here that there's not a lot of data about women in the porn industry. There's not a lot of data about the porn industry in general. There's mostly what you find when you look for information about the porn industry is information about how porn impacts consumers and like the consumption of porn in general. There's been a really recent surge in personal accounts from people within the porn industry. Part of that came with the Me Too movement. A lot of people were like, oh hey, I'm in the porn industry and me too. But then when Sesta and Fosta became sort of enacted, I guess, there were a lot of people that came forward like, hey, this is how porn has been really good to me. And so that's where a lot of, I think, research needs to be done is statistical data coming from within the porn industry. Next, I just want to hit some points from this paper that I read called Debunking the Damaged Goods Hypothesis. And this paper took 176 or 178 porn actresses and asked them a bunch of questions about why they got into the porn industry and their past life experiences to see if there were any indicators like past violence or growing up predictors that someone would then later be in the porn industry. And what they found was that people within the porn industry had similar rates of childhood sexual abuse as people outside of the industry. So that's to say that being a victim of childhood sexual abuse is not necessarily an indicator that you will go into porn. It's not a driving factor, and it's not a super like big commonality among porn stars. Next, porn actresses are more likely to misuse alcohol, but they are not more likely to misuse other drugs. Next, porn actresses actually had higher self-esteem and quality of life indicators than their non-porn actress counterparts. So I think that's a really important point to hit. A lot of people think that people go into porn because they have low self-esteem or because they have daddy issues or what the fuck ever. But this study sort of showed us that that's not necessarily the case. The last point that I want to hit is that porn actresses are more likely to have had sex earlier and to have more sex partners than people outside the porn industry, and that to me makes a whole lot of sense because if you're getting paid to have sex with people, then I feel like you're probably going to have more sex than people who are not getting paid to have sex with people. So those are just like quick points to sort of set you up with an idea of who goes into porn. So another study asked similar participants why they got into the industry, and the biggest reason was money. Next was sex and attention. So people got into the industry because they thought the money was good, they liked having sex, they wanted attention. Other super common reasons were it looked fun, it provided an opportunity for creative expression and personal growth. The most uncommon reason was coercion. 1 out of 178 participants said that they were coerced into being into the porn, or into being in porn. And I think that's really important to understand is that while there's this sort of conception, or at least where I grew up, there was this really common conception that people only do porn because other people tell them to. That's not what the data show. So people stay in the porn industry because the money's good, the people are awesome, they like having sex, or they like having freedom and independence. I just want to touch on the freedom and independence thing. It's really great to be able to pick up and turn down jobs. You get to pick who you work with and who you work for, and that's not always something you get to do outside of the porn industry, and I think that's pretty awesome. So the same study looked at reported dislikes, what people didn't like about being in the porn industry, and one of the biggest things was people. Sometimes you have to work with some really shitty people. STI risk and exposure risk, exploitation and working conditions were all like the top 4 dislikes of being in the porn industry. And I think that these are things that can all be fixed with unionization, but that's something that I think you need more people in the industry to collaborate on and advocate for, if that's something that they want. And I don't think I get to speak on behalf of all people in the porn industry, especially since my experience is with these very sort of outer edge fetish websites and clients. So within the industry there are some problems, for sure. One of the biggest problems within the industry, I think, is the lack of benefits. So there's no health insurance, there's no PTO, there's no sick leave, there's no maternity leave, none of that, because you're pretty much freelance. You pick up and turn down jobs. You can work for an agency, but a lot of people don't. So I think that that's a huge problem within the industry, and I would argue that that's a form of exploitation. You're expecting people to produce this product for you, but you're not giving them the benefits that people in other industries get. And I think that this is very similar to how we treat fast food workers. We're like, oh, you don't want to go flip burgers, but then we also want our 2 a.m. fillet of fish or whatever the fuck you eat at 2 a.m. Other problems within the industry include sexual assault on set, and this has been documented pretty much since the rise of mainstream porn, from Linda Lovelace to the most recent Leap Raven and Riley Nixon accounts of sexual assault on set. And if you want more information about that, I'm definitely going to link that out in the description of this video, probably if I can figure it out somewhere in here. Other things that happen are coercion on set. So you go to a set, you've already got an idea of what you're going to shoot. You get there, you start shooting. You don't get paid until the very end. And so it's really easy to say, hey, can you do this one extra thing that we didn't discuss before? And as a performer, it's really easy to be like, wow, I've been here for 4 or 5 hours. If I just do this one thing, I can get paid and go home and pay my rent. And so that sort of coercion happens. And that's something that definitely needs to be looked at and addressed. Another thing that happens is continued employment of performers who are known to do shady shit. Continued employment of people in general who are known to do shady shit. Like James Dean. Like, just throwing that out there. Fucking James Dean. Okay. So how people outside the industry can help, basically pay for your fucking porn. Like, stop with the Pornhub. Another really important thing you can do if you're outside the industry is listen to people in the industry. So if someone in the industry has a really strong opinion on a piece of legislation like SESTA and FOSTA, listen to them and take action steps that you can take, like contacting your representatives or petitioning or whatever you can do. Definitely take those steps that they're asking you to take. When performers accuse people of shady shit, stop supporting the people who do shitty shit, and then they won't be employed, and then they won't be in the industry to make it unsafe. And that's really important. The last thing that I really want to stress is don't shame people for the production of a product that you consume. So if you're going around to sex workers and being like, you're such a slut, but then you're going home and jerking it to their porn or to porn similar to what they make, you're really like not helping anybody. So that's about a really short summary of the talk that I gave, and that really touches on the violence within the porn industry. And there's definitely a lot more that's happening, and there's definitely a lot more violence within the broader sex work industry, but I don't really get to speak to that. And I think if you want to know more about violence within the broader sex work industry, you definitely have to talk to other people who are in the broader sex work industry. So ask a stripper, ask a full service sex worker, ask pretty much anybody, ask other porn actresses, ask people who do mainstream porn, ask people who do weirder fetish stuff than I do. Ask. And I think as someone who's trained in anthropology, going forward, especially coming out of this term in school, I realized sort of the lack of knowledge and the lack of research being done on people in the sex industry, especially the lack of ethical research being done on people in the sex industry. And I think that that's something that I as an academic want to address, and I think if it's something that you have the resources to do as an academic or as a person who pays money to academic institutions, do it. Do some ethical research on sex workers. Like, I myself am in porn, and so I think that it's a little bit more ethical and a lot easier for me to go into the industry and talk to other sex workers and get some real solid ethnographic and statistical data. And I think we need more people who have that ability. And so if you're fortunate like me, and I know I really am fortunate and privileged to have the education that I have and to have the opportunities that I have to be able to contribute to research and to be able to give talks about violence in the sex industry. So yeah, do research if you can, and do ethical research. I think that's the biggest point, like ethical research, because there's a lot of research that sort of frames people in the sex industry as victims, but it's a lot of research that's being done by like old white Christian men in really old white Christian colleges, and so I don't think that it's necessarily like accurate or ethical. Just a thought. Yeah. So that sort of derailed, but my opinion on violence in the sex industry is you need to ask other people about their experiences. There needs to be more research, and there needs to be action steps taken, and I think that in order to figure out what those action steps are, you need to talk to more people in the industry. Yeah, thanks. That was such a good question, and I'm sorry that this sort of got lost on a ramble, but I hope that it was informative and helpful, and I'll definitely link out some of the resources that I was citing as I was talking.